This is not an official story. You won't find it in NASA reports, you won't hear it on the news, you won't read about it in scientific journals, but it circulates in forums, on closed servers, in archives accessible not through a login, but through personal recommendation. A fragment of an interview that was never supposed to exist. A recording made in private. A voice someone tried to erase, but didn't succeed. In this video, we'll show you something that has long existed as rumors, mentions, anonymous messages, and then a single file, an audio recording uploaded under a code name marked with labels typical of NASA's internal documentation. At the center of this story is a former NASA research engineer. His name is John Mark Bennett. He spent nearly a decade working at NASA Ames Biotech Division. Officially, his job was focused on sensory interfaces and biometric monitoring of astronauts in zero-gravity environments. But over the past 20 years, his name has become almost forbidden in certain circles, because he was the first to speak about a phenomenon later referred to as the reverse signature of consciousness. He claimed that consciousness does not vanish after death, it transforms. And perhaps most disturbingly, it responds. That claim cost him his career. The audio file featuring him was seized, deleted, overwritten. But as it often happens, one copy slipped through, and that copy became the foundation of our investigation. We gathered fragments, internal documents, leaks, testimonies from former colleagues, scattered quotes. We examined every detail of this strange story, so you could hear it in full. No embellishments, no hysteria, no mysticism, only facts, indirectly confirmed but too consistent to ignore. You don't have to believe, but you deserve to know that this recording exists. Because if what Bennett said is true, our entire model of reality needs to be re-examined. And not just from a scientific standpoint. This isn't about aliens, it's not about God. Not even about an afterlife in the religious sense. It's about a structure, a consciousness that, according to the engineer, reflects outside the body and continues to exist, even after the heart stops. Are you ready to hear it? Because this interview was never meant for the public. It was recorded on personal initiative, filed in an archive under the label private. Not for review, it vanished for nearly a decade, but in 2007, a fragment surfaced on a closed forum. Within 48 hours, it was deleted, but thousands of people saved it, including us. That recording is the basis of this story. Maybe someone will try to erase it again. Maybe this video won't stay up for long. But if you're watching it now, it means it's still here. And in front of you is that voice. The one that said, "We were never the body, but you have always been us." His name was John Mark Bennett, age 52 at the time of dismissal. Position, research engineer at the NASA Ames Research Center Biotech Division. Years of service, 1989 to 1997. Specialization, sensory interfaces and biometric response tracking in zero-gravity conditions. One of those NASA insiders often referred to as a pure technician. He didn't take part in press tours, never appeared on television, had no public presence on social media, and until a certain point, wasn't even listed in open scientific databases. At first glance, a typical technical employee, educated at MIT with a master's degree in applied physics, married, 3 children, no scandals, no strange public statements. But in 2002, his name resurfaced. In a very specific context. At an international neurointerface conference in Zurich, one of the speakers, while discussing the prospects of reading brain signals under deep anesthesia, casually mentioned Bennett from NASA. The quote sounded like a throwaway line. As Bennett said, "Consciousness leaves a residual echo, even when the body no longer functions." The audience chuckled. Some laughed. But one man, Professor Pierre Rodin, an expert in transcranial stimulation, didn't laugh. In a closed interview years later, he said, "At that moment I thought either it was a mistake or someone saw more than they were supposed to, and if they saw it, it was already being erased." When researchers tried to reconstruct Bennett's biography, they found that all open records end in 1997. NASA's internal response to inquiries was brief. He left for personal reasons. He failed his security reclearance. We do not conduct research on post-mortem consciousness. However, in 2008, an anonymously published internal note surfaced on one of the archival forums. It contained a single chilling sentence. He asked the wrong question, and he got an answer. From that point, it became clear. There was a question. There was an answer. All that remained was to find out, in which project did it happen? In the mid-1990s, NASA was conducting several little-known programs related to the psychophysiological state of astronauts during long-duration space missions. One of those projects, codenamed Esfera, focused on monitoring not only physiological but neurosensory data, alpha, theta, and gamma brainwave rhythms, especially during altered states, sleep, meditation, and the dying process. Officially, the project was described as next-generation tech for stress and fatigue monitoring in space. But in the technical documentation leaked online in 2010, the goals were more specific. Logging brain activity after critical cardiac slowdown, simulating transitional states through medical sedation, studying structural neural behavior at the moment of full cardiac arrest. Bennett was in charge of developing the software module for signal analysis. His system was designed to record the tiniest fluctuations in brain activity, even after all baseline life parameters had dropped to zero. And one day, the system picked up an anomaly. During one test involving volunteers under medical sedation to simulate a near-death transition, something unexpected happened. 7 minutes after the recorded cardiac arrest, the graph, which should have flatlined, suddenly spiked. Not random, not noise, but a clear structured output, a pulsating spiral waveform, repeating fractal-like waves, and something visually similar to an EEG. But reversed. Bennett labeled it the reverse signature of consciousness. He initially marked it as an artifact, a glitch, but 3 weeks later the same anomaly reappeared, different subjects, different physiological profiles. Same result, 6 to 8 minutes after cardiac arrest, the signal ignited again and disappeared. According to a source in NASA's Internal Security Division, after the third confirmed anomaly, Bennett was granted access to a dedicated server and private testing capacity. Thus began the unofficial protocol known as Interface Gate, or simply I-Gate. The premise was simple. If consciousness continues something, you attempt contact, not in a spiritual sense, but through analyzing feedback to controlled external impulses. During session 11, something occurred that no one expected. The system captured a return signal. Not random, but patterned. And on the corresponding audio file, later analyzed by independent researchers, there was a single phrase: "We were never the body, but you have always been us." This wasn't a synthesizer. It wasn't a malfunction. The spectrogram revealed rhythmic patterns typical of human speech, but with frequency modulations outside the vocal range, as if the voice came not from a mouth, but from the field itself. 3 days after this session, Bennett was called into a closed meeting. Within 24 hours, his access was suspended. Within a week, he left NASA. The contract was terminated by mutual agreement. With one condition, he was never to speak publicly. But 5 years later, he did. His name appears rarely in public records. In NASA's internal files, he is listed as a senior systems biologist, a specialist in biometric monitoring of astronauts. Internal Department, Medical Data and Autonomic Research Group. Location: NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, Alabama. In August 1996, Dr. R, his real name withheld for ethical reasons, suffered a cardiac arrest. It happened at his home in Huntsville. Cause: acute parasympathetic failure after severe exhaustion. Medical resuscitation lasted approximately 8 minutes, during which no pulse was recorded. Official death was never declared, as he did respond to defibrillation. Dr. R survived. He spent 6 days in the hospital. Everything seemed normal. But on the 7th day, something happened. Something that changed everything. During a visit from 2 colleagues, Dr. A neurophysiologist, and an audio technician from NASA, Dr. R suddenly spoke a phrase that would later become the core of a confidential interview. "I wasn't here. I was inside a structure, something that knew who I was even when I didn't." He said it calmly, without emotion, as a simple statement. 3 weeks later, he asked those same colleagues to meet again and to bring a tape recorder. No one knew exactly what he wanted to say. He had no intention of publishing it. He said, "I just want this to exist somewhere, not for everyone, but for those who are looking." The interview lasted 63 minutes. It was recorded on a standard Sony cassette recorder. 3 people were present: Dr. Rowe, Dr. A, and the NASA audio specialist. There was no script, no edits, no journalists. What follows are excerpts from the transcript obtained through an internal archival source. Q: You say you were somewhere. Where exactly? A: I can't describe it as a place. It wasn't a location. It was more like a field of consciousness that wasn't mine, and yet completely me. There was no thinking, only knowing. I wasn't feeling emotions, I was becoming them. Q: Was it like a dream? A: Number: A dream happens inside you. This was outside. It felt like something or someone was watching me. From inside myself, not from the outside, but from the core of who I am. Q: What did you see? Aeon: Structures. Not buildings, but patterns. As if someone had built a frame out of memory and sensation. Light turning into shapes. Transitions between emotions, isolation, fear, then acceptance, then understanding. None of it had physical form, but all of it had structure. Later in the interview, he used the phrase, "It was like a framework of the soul, a tunnel with corridors of sensation." But there was no time there, only a sequence of meaning. He claimed that everything he had ever felt existed as patterns, and those patterns could be walked through again, but this time with understanding. As if emotions were not linear but spatial. One of the most unsettling parts of the interview involved a voice, or rather, a thought. It didn't come from the outside. According to him, it came from somewhere within. But not from his usual sense of self, rather from a deeper, older version of who he was. He described it this way: "I heard a thought, not in words, but as direct knowing. It said, 'You are not lost. You simply haven't remembered yet.'" That phrase became the centerpiece of the entire recording. He repeated it twice, then fell silent. After the interview, he asked, "Don't publish this, don't share it, just..." Let a copy exist. Let it stay somewhere. The recording was placed in NASA's internal archive under the label, private, not for review. 11 years passed. In 2007, during a routine digitization of old NASA audio archives, a technician, whose name was never disclosed, came across a file with the label NDE-internal-archive_1996-consciousstructure.wav. The file was not listed in the inventory. The tag NDE, near-death experience, was not standard for NASA's internal system. Its presence raised questions. The technician made a personal copy. 3 years later, in 2010, he uploaded a 17-minute excerpt to a private forum dedicated to near-death experiences. The post lasted 48 hours. Then, it was removed. The user's account was suspended. The forum itself was shut down, without explanation. But in that time, hundreds of people managed to download the clip. From that moment, the recording began circulating as rumors, as encrypted archives, as fragments in anonymous messages and private drives. After a fragment of the audio recording surfaced in 2010, it triggered a quiet storm. Not in the media, but in research circles, especially among NDE investigators. The forum where it was posted went offline within 48 hours. No explanation. Domain ownership was rerouted. Backups. Inaccessible. A publication that briefly analyzed the recording deleted the article and issued an apology stating the content may have violated NASA policy and ethical guidelines. The user who uploaded the file vanished. Email bounced. Forum profile erased. Attempts to trace the person failed. Everything was either falsified or wiped. Still, the recording spread. Independent researchers archived it. Copies began circulating. Fragments, transcripts, encrypted archives. But the most disturbing part wasn't what the tape said. It was what surrounded it. The recording begins with faint static, then a whisper. After spectral enhancement, the message became clear. This was not meant to survive. You must stop this. The rest, a calm voice describing a structure of consciousness, a reality without time. The final moment and a sharp inhale, as if someone or something interrupted the recording. Experts noted the silence that followed wasn't digital, it felt physical, like someone had manually stopped the tape. And then the questions began. Who stopped it? Why is only 17 minutes available? What else was said? In 2011, a researcher uncovered a scan of a handwritten note, allegedly by Dr. A, who attended the interview. It quoted Dr. R after the recording ended. "We won't die. We will unravel. Like an equation completed, everything we searched for outside was a way to remember who we were." He also described a process he called the stages of return. Awareness outside the body, filtering of experiences and judged by growth, not morality, encounter with the deeper self. Pre-physical identity, choice to return or remain, based on completion, not reward. These ideas later spread anonymously as reincarnation theories. But Dr. R's name never appeared. No confirmation ever came. Why was it suppressed? According to leaked NASA correspondence, the interview wasn't banned because of what it described, but because of what it could change. If even part of it is true, 5 pillars collapse. Science must admit consciousness isn't brain-based. Medicine must address the soul. Religion loses its monopoly on the afterlife. Politics loses fear as a control tool. Education must go inward, not just outward. The real threat wasn't mysticism, it was internal freedom. Because when a person realizes their awareness doesn't end with the body, they stop being afraid. And a person without fear can't be controlled. Aftermath. The forum was shut down. The article removed, the uploader disappeared. NASA issued a short statement. No studies on post-mortem consciousness are or have been conducted. And yet, the recording survived, and that's where this all began. In 2011, Dr. R's niece shared a letter he wrote days before his death. It didn't explain, and it hinted, if you're reading this and something inside tightens, don't seek answers. Just ask yourself, what if everything you've ever felt was a calling, and you've always heard it, you just didn't know from where? The full tape was never found. Only a fragment remains. 17 minutes. But maybe that's all we were meant to hear. If even part of this is true, then consciousness doesn't end. It waits. And the real reason this was silenced isn't mysticism. It's freedom. Because a mind without fear is a mind no longer controlled. Voices from the other side. If something inside you just remembered, you've already heard it.